You think country grandmas just threw ingredients together and hoped for the best? Think again. These mountain women possessed kitchen wisdom passed down through generations, tricks that stretched pennies, preserved harvests, and transformed scraps into sustenance. Let's dig into 30 forgotten hillbilly cooking tricks no one remembers anymore. Saving bacon grease in a tin can by the stove was the cornerstone of hillbilly kitchen economy, a practice so essential that no mountain woman would dream of cooking without it. Every morning after frying salt-cured bacon, Grandma carefully poured the rendered fat through a strainer into a coffee can kept warm near the wood stove. That golden grease became liquid gold, used for frying eggs, seasoning skillets, flavoring beans, greasing biscuit pans, and enriching cornbread batter. The can sat there for years, constantly replenished, developing layers of smoky flavor that store-bought shortening could never match. Children learned early never to discard bacon drippings, understanding that waste was sinful in kitchens where money was scarce. The grease provided essential calories during lean winter months when fresh meat was impossible to find. This simple practice represented everything about mountain cooking: thrift, patience, and the knowledge that flavor compounds over time. Buttermilk tenderizing was a secret weapon passed between generations of country cooks who understood that tough cuts could become fork tender with patience. When families butchered older hens past their laying prime or worked with wild game from hunting trips, Grandma submerged the meat in buttermilk overnight, sometimes for 2 days. The natural acids broke down tough muscle fibers, while the fats kept meat moist during soaking. Rabbit, squirrel, venison, and old roosters all benefited from this treatment, emerging tender enough for frying or stewing. The buttermilk also pulled out gamey flavors that might make wild meat unpalatable to children. After soaking, meat was patted dry, dredged in seasoned flour, and fried crisp in bacon grease. Nothing was wasted. Leftover buttermilk went to the pigs or chickens. This trick cost almost nothing since buttermilk was a byproduct of churning butter, turning kitchen scraps into culinary magic. Stretching coffee with chicory root or roasted barley was how mountain families kept their morning ritual alive when real coffee was too expensive or unavailable at country stores. Grandma would dig chicory roots from roadsides, scrub them clean, slice them thin, and roast them slowly until dark brown and brittle. Ground fine and mixed with whatever coffee the family could afford, chicory added body and a slightly bitter earthiness that many people actually preferred. Some families roasted barley, rye, or dried corn kernels as coffee stretchers, creating blends so familiar children grew up thinking that was how coffee tasted. During the Depression and war years, these substitutes sometimes replaced coffee entirely, yet families gathered around kitchen tables just the same, warming hands on mugs filled with dark, steaming liquid. The practice taught that ritual and togetherness mattered more than expensive ingredients and that resourcefulness preserved normalcy during hard times. Pot liquor was never discarded in a hillbilly kitchen because Grandma understood that the murky liquid left after boiling greens contained more nutrition than the vegetables themselves. When collards, turnip greens, or wild poke salad simmered for hours with a ham hock or fatback, the cooking water absorbed vitamins, minerals, and rich pork flavor. Rather than pouring this treasure down the drain, families saved pot liquor for drinking straight from cups, for soaking cornbread, or for soup and gravy bases. Elders believed it cured everything from winter colds to weak constitutions. The iron and vitamins helped prevent deficiencies common in communities with limited food variety. Children learned to love the salty taste, dunking cornbread until it softened into something between soup and porridge. Some families kept liquor warming on the stove for days, adding fresh water and vegetables as needed. This humble byproduct represented the mountain philosophy of waste nothing and nourish everyone. Stale bread transformation was an art form in mountain kitchens where throwing away food was considered sinful. Grandma never discarded hardened loaves or dried-out biscuits. Instead, she saw raw materials for entirely new dishes. Stale bread became bread pudding when combined with eggs, milk, sugar, and whatever spices were available, baked golden and served warm with cream. Dried biscuits were crushed into crumbs for coating fried foods or stretching meatloaf, adding texture while reducing expensive ground meat. Old cornbread was crumbled into buttermilk for quick breakfast or mixed with onions and sage for holiday dressing. Some grandmas dried bread completely, storing it in cloth bags for months. The practice extended to every baked good. Stale cake became trifle, old pie crust became soup crackers. Children grew up understanding that freshness was temporary, but usefulness was permanent, that every ingredient deserved multiple lives before finally feeding the chickens or pigs. Cast iron seasoning was sacred knowledge passed from mother to daughter, determining whether a woman could properly keep house and feed her family. Grandma's skillets had been seasoned for decades, their surfaces black and glossy from countless layers of lard rubbed in and baked on until naturally non-stick. New brides received cast iron as wedding gifts along with strict instructions. Never use soap, never let water sit, always wipe with grease after washing. The seasoning process was ritualistic. Coat the pan with lard, bake it upside down for hours, let it cool completely, repeat until the surface gleamed. A properly seasoned skillet could fry eggs that slid like they were on ice, could sear cornbread with a perfect crust, could last through generations of daily use. Some families had skillets tracing back to great-grandmothers, the accumulated seasoning containing decades of family meals. Losing that seasoning through careless cleaning was considered a tragedy. Pressure canning summer vegetables was the difference between eating well through winter and going hungry when snow covered mountain gardens. Grandma spent late summer surrounded by mason jars, boiling kettles, and bushels of tomatoes, green beans, corn, and whatever else the garden produced. The pressure canner hissed on the wood stove while children helped wash vegetables and pack jars, learning skills they would carry into their own households. Each sealed jar represented security, food that would last through lean months when nothing fresh grew and money for store-bought goods didn't exist. Root cellars filled with rows of jewel-toned jars, ruby tomatoes, golden corn, emerald green beans, purple beets. The work was exhausting and hot, lasting from dawn until dark for weeks. But when January winds howled and snow drifted against cabin walls, families opened those jars and tasted summer. Every bite reminded them that hard work during plenty created comfort during scarcity. Apple scrap vinegar production turned kitchen waste into a valuable pantry staple that served dozens of purposes throughout the year. When Grandma peeled apples for pies or sauce, she saved every core and peeling in a crock covered with water and cloth. Over weeks, wild yeasts fermented the sugars into alcohol. Then bacteria transformed that alcohol into sharp, tangy vinegar. The process required patience, knowing when to stir, when to skim, when the vinegar was strong enough for use. The finished product preserved pickles, cleaned kitchen surfaces, dressed salads, and served as medicine for sore throats and digestive troubles. Some families kept mother of vinegar, the gelatinous culture that accelerated fermentation, passing it down through generations like sourdough starter. Making vinegar from scraps that would otherwise feed pigs demonstrated the mountain philosophy that nothing useful should ever be discarded. Every apple entering the kitchen gave twice, first as food, then as preservation tool. Lard rendering day was a major event following every hog butchering, when families transformed pounds of raw pig fat into the cooking staple that would carry them through the entire year. Grandma cut leaf fat and back fat into small cubes, placing them in huge iron kettles over outdoor fires that burned low and slow for hours. As fat melted, she stirred constantly with long wooden paddles, watching for the moment cracklings turned golden and floated to the surface. The liquid lard was strained through cloth into containers where it cooled into pure white blocks, perfect for pie crusts, biscuits, frying, and any cooking requiring fat. Nothing matched the flaky tenderness that properly rendered lard gave to baked goods. Leftover cracklings were seasoned with salt and eaten as snacks or crumbled into cornbread for extra richness. Families stored lard in crocks in the root cellar where cool temperatures kept it fresh for months. This single process provided essential cooking fat all year. Sour milk baking was a technique that transformed what modern families would consider spoiled dairy into the secret ingredient for the fluffiest biscuits and most tender cakes. Before refrigeration, milk clabbered naturally within days, thickening and developing a tangy flavor similar to buttermilk. Rather than viewing this as waste, Grandma embraced clabbered milk as a superior baking ingredient. The natural acids reacted with baking soda to create extra lift, producing biscuits that rose high and light, pancakes that stayed fluffy, and cakes with remarkable tenderness. Children learned to smell milk before pouring. Slightly sour meant perfect for baking. Truly spoiled went to the pigs. Some grandmas intentionally set milk aside in warm spots to encourage clabbering. The practice required understanding the difference between safely soured and dangerously spoiled, knowledge passed through observation and experience. When refrigeration became common, this skill faded, and with it the particular taste that clabbered milk provided. Waterglass egg preservation allowed mountain families to store fresh eggs for months without refrigeration, ensuring protein through winter when hens stopped laying. Grandma dissolved sodium silicate in water to create a thick gel-like solution in large crocks. Fresh eggs, gathered the same day and never washed to preserve their natural coating, were gently lowered into the mixture until submerged. The solution sealed porous shells, preventing air and bacteria from entering while keeping moisture inside. Properly stored eggs lasted 6 months or longer in cool root cellars, tasting nearly as fresh as when laid. Families packed dozens of eggs in late summer when hens produced abundantly, creating reserves for winter baking. The practice required careful selection. Only perfect, uncracked eggs would keep. Children learned to handle eggs gently, understanding each one represented future meals. When refrigeration arrived, Waterglass faded from kitchens, taking with it generations of preservation knowledge. Herb drying and storage was essential knowledge that transformed summer gardens into year-round flavor sources. Grandma harvested sage, thyme, rosemary, and dill at their peak, cutting stems in the morning after dew evaporated, but before afternoon sun wilted leaves. Small bundles were tied with string and hung upside down from kitchen rafters where warm air circulated freely. Over weeks, the herbs dried slowly, concentrating essential oils into potent seasonings that lasted through winter. Once completely dry, leaves were stripped and stored in small jars away from light and moisture. A pinch of dried sage transformed bland pork, while dried mint made winter teas feel medicinal and warming. Some grandmas crushed herbs into powder, others kept leaves whole for controlled seasoning. The hanging bundles became kitchen decorations, their fragrance filling the air with reminders of summer abundance even during the coldest months when gardens lay buried under snow. Lye soap making from wood ashes and rendered fat was a skill every mountain woman possessed, producing harsh but effective cleanser for families and households. Grandma collected hardwood ashes from the fireplace throughout winter, storing them in barrels until spring soap making time. Water poured through the ashes leached out lye, the caustic liquid dripping into buckets below. This homemade lye was combined with saved cooking fats and boiled together in large kettles outdoors. The mixture transformed through saponification into thick brown soap poured into wooden molds to harden. The resulting bars cleaned anything from greasy skillets to dirty overalls, though they were rough on skin. Some grandmas added herbs to soften harshness. The process required careful attention since lye could cause serious burns if handled carelessly. This self-sufficiency meant families never worried about running out of soap regardless of money or store access. Root cellar organization was an exact science that determined whether vegetables lasted through winter or rotted within weeks. Grandma understood that different produce required different conditions. Some needed humidity while others demanded dry air. Some kept best in sand while others hung from rafters. Potatoes were stored in complete darkness to prevent greening, layered in wooden bins with straw between layers for air circulation. Apples were wrapped individually in newspaper and kept far from potatoes since the gases they released would cause sprouting. Cabbages hung upside down from the ceiling by their roots, staying fresh for months in the cold, humid air. Carrots, turnips, and beets were buried in boxes of damp sand that kept them crisp without allowing rot. Onions and garlic hung in braided strings near the entrance where air moved freely. Grandma checked the cellar weekly, removing anything showing signs of spoilage before it could spread. This careful management meant families ate garden vegetables well into spring. Sourdough starter maintenance was a responsibility passed down through generations, with some families keeping the same living culture alive for decades. Grandma fed her starter daily with flour and water, keeping it warm near the wood stove where temperatures stayed consistent. The wild yeasts living in that bubbly mixture provided leavening for bread, biscuits, and pancakes without store-bought yeast. A healthy starter smelled pleasantly sour and doubled in size within hours of feeding. Grandma knew her starter's moods, adjusting schedules and temperatures based on how it looked and smelled. Before long trips, starter was dried on cloth or shared with neighbors for safekeeping. New brides often received a portion of their mother's starter as a wedding gift, carrying tradition into new households. The starter connected generations through a living organism that had nourished ancestors and would feed descendants. Losing a starter through neglect was considered a minor tragedy in households that valued continuity. Smokehouse operation was crucial knowledge for preserving the hogs and wild game that provided protein through winter months. Every farm had a smokehouse, a small wooden building where meat hung in fragrant clouds of hickory, apple, or oak smoke for weeks at a time. After butchering and salt curing, hams, bacon slabs, and sausages were suspended from hooks high above smoldering fires that never quite flamed. The smoke deposited preservative compounds onto the meat while slowly drying it, creating an environment hostile to bacteria and insects. Grandma monitored the smokehouse daily, adjusting ventilation and adding wood to maintain consistent temperatures and smoke density. The process could take 3 weeks or longer for large hams, requiring patience and vigilance. Properly smoked meat could hang in cool pantries for a year without spoiling, providing precious protein when fresh meat was unavailable. The rich, smoky flavor became so associated with mountain cooking that store-bought meat seemed bland by comparison. Salt curing pork was the foundation of meat preservation in mountain communities, transforming fresh cuts into shelf-stable protein that sustained families through winter. Immediately after hog butchering in cold weather, Grandma rubbed every surface of hams, shoulders, and bacon slabs with coarse salt, mixed with a little sugar and saltpeter. The salted meat was packed in wooden boxes or barrels, covered with more salt, and left in cold outbuildings for several weeks. The salt drew moisture from the meat while penetrating deep into the flesh, creating conditions where bacteria couldn't survive. Larger cuts required longer curing times. Big hams might sit in salt for 6 weeks before being ready. After curing, excess salt was scrubbed off and the meat either hung in smokehouses or stored in cloth bags in cool pantries. Before cooking, salt pork required overnight soaking to remove excess saltiness. The practice demanded understanding of temperatures, timing, and salt quantities that varied based on meat thickness and weather conditions. Butter churning was weekly labor that transformed cream skimmed from daily milk into the golden fat essential for baking and cooking. Grandma collected cream in crocks throughout the week, letting it ripen slightly in cool temperatures until enough accumulated for churning. The cream was poured into a wooden dasher churn or ceramic crock, and then came the rhythmic work, plunging the dasher up and down for what seemed like hours until the fat separated from buttermilk. Children often took turns at the churn, their small arms tiring before the butter finally came together in golden clumps floating in thin liquid. The butter was gathered, washed repeatedly in cold water to remove all buttermilk, then worked with wooden paddles to press out remaining moisture. Salt was kneaded in for preservation, and the butter was packed into molds or crocks for storage. The leftover buttermilk became valuable for baking. Homemade butter tasted richer and more complex than store-bought, its flavor reflecting what the cows had been eating. Meat stretching with fillers was an art that allowed small amounts of expensive protein to feed large families without anyone feeling cheated. Grandma extended ground meat with oatmeal, breadcrumbs, cracker crumbs, or cooked rice, creating meatloaves and patties that were moist, flavorful, and went twice as far. The fillers absorbed meat juices during cooking, meaning nothing was lost while portions doubled. Stews contained more potatoes, carrots, and onions than meat, yet the broth carried enough flavor that every bite tasted rich. Soups started with ham bones or chicken backs simmered for hours, the essence of meat flavoring gallons of liquid that became meals for days. Gravy made from pan drippings stretched across plates of biscuits, giving the impression of meat without the expense. Children grew up satisfied with these stretched meals, not realizing until adulthood how little actual meat they contained. The skill lay in proportions and seasonings that made modest ingredients feel abundant and satisfying. Cooking water. Reuse was standard practice in hillbilly kitchens where even liquid carried value, and nothing went down the drain unnecessarily. Potato water, the starchy liquid left after boiling potatoes, became the base for bread dough, adding moisture and helping loaves rise with a tender crumb. Vegetable cooking water went into soups and gravies rather than being discarded, carrying vitamins and flavor otherwise lost. Water used to boil ham or bacon was saved for cooking beans, infusing them with smoky pork flavor without additional meat. Even pasta water, thick with starch, was saved for thickening sauces or feeding animals. Grandma kept pots of saved cooking liquids on the back of the stove, incorporating them into the next meal seamlessly. The practice reflected understanding that extraction happened during cooking. Nutrients and flavors transferred to water, making it valuable. Modern cooks discard these liquids without thought, losing what mountain women recognized as essential resources. Onion skin dyeing was a practical craft that transformed kitchen scraps into beautiful fabric colors for household textiles. Grandma saved papery brown onion skins throughout the year, stuffing them into cloth bags until enough accumulated for a dye bath. The skins were simmered in large pots of water for hours, releasing rich golden and rust-colored pigments. Wool yarn, cotton fabric, and Easter eggs emerged from these baths in shades ranging from pale yellow to deep burnt orange. The process required no expensive mordants. Natural compounds in onion skins fixed color permanently. Children helped gather skins and watched the transformation as white cloth entered the pot and emerged changed. Some grandmas experimented with other scraps: walnut hulls for brown, beet tops for pink, pokeberries for purple. The practice demonstrated that beauty could be created from materials others discarded, that color and creativity required only knowledge and patience rather than money. Ash hopper maintenance was essential for producing lye needed for soap making and food preservation. The hopper, a large wooden container shaped like a funnel, sat outside near the kitchen, filled with hardwood ashes saved from winter fires. Rain or poured water trickled through packed ashes, emerging from a spout at the bottom as caustic lye strong enough to transform fat into soap. Grandma tested lye strength by floating a feather or egg. If they floated high, the lye was ready. Weak lye required boiling down to concentrate it. The ashes needed regular attention, stirring and repacking to prevent channels that let water pass without extracting alkaline compounds. Different wood species produced different strengths. Hickory and oak were prized while pine was avoided. This simple technology provided essential chemistry for rural households, turning fireplace waste into valuable cleaning and preservation supplies without store-bought ingredients. Milk cooling without refrigeration required ingenuity and understanding of evaporation physics that mountain women mastered through necessity. Grandma kept milk in ceramic crocks wrapped with wet burlap, placed where breezes could reach them. As water evaporated from the wet fabric, it pulled heat away from the crock, keeping milk cooler than the surrounding air. Some families built spring houses over cold mountain streams, using constant 50-degree water to chill crocks of milk and butter. Others dug root cellars deep enough that summer temperatures never penetrated. Milk jugs were lowered into wells on ropes, suspended just above cold water. These cooling methods extended milk's freshness from hours to days, making dairy products practical, even in summer heat. Children learned to check wrapped crocks and re-wet fabric before it dried completely. The techniques required daily attention but provided essential cooling that modern refrigerators now handle automatically. Flour sack sewing transformed humble cotton bags that held bulk flour and feed into clothing, curtains, quilts, and household linens. Manufacturers recognized this practice and began printing sacks with colorful patterns appealing to rural women. Grandma carefully opened sacks along seams to preserve maximum fabric, then soaked and scrubbed them to remove brand printing. From these beginnings came children's dresses, aprons, underwear, pillowcases, and dish towels, all sewn by hand or on treadle machines. Matching a dress required buying multiple sacks of the same pattern, which merchants used to encourage brand loyalty. Nothing was wasted. Even small scraps became quilt pieces. Children grew up wearing flour sack clothing without shame, understanding that resourcefulness mattered more than store-bought fabric. The practice continued well into the 1950s, leaving memories of mothers creating beauty from what others considered packaging to be discarded. Fruit leather making preserved summer's berry harvest in a form that lasted through winter without canning equipment or sugar. Grandma cooked berries or apples down into thick puree, then spread the mixture thinly across wooden boards or greased baking sheets. These were placed in the sun or near wood stoves where warm, dry air slowly dehydrated the fruit over several days. The finished leather could be rolled, cut into strips, and stored in crocks or cloth bags where it kept for months. Children loved these chewy, intensely flavored treats that tasted like concentrated summer. The process worked with nearly any fruit. Peaches, plums, grapes, and wild berries all transformed into portable, shelf-stable snacks. Some grandmas added honey or spices to vary flavors, while others kept preparation simple to let fruit shine through. Making leather required patience and attention to weather since humidity could spoil a batch, but successful efforts provided healthy sweets when fresh fruit was months away from ripening. Kraut stomping was annual autumn labor that transformed abundant cabbage into fermented sauerkraut lasting through winter. Grandma shredded cabbages by the bushel, layering shreds with salt in large wooden barrels or ceramic crocks. Then came the stomping, using wooden paddles or clean bare feet to crush cabbage until juices released and covered the vegetable. This brine created anaerobic conditions where beneficial bacteria thrived while harmful organisms couldn't survive. Heavy stones weighed down wooden lids, keeping cabbage submerged during weeks of fermentation. Grandma skimmed foam and checked progress regularly, knowing by smell and taste when the kraut developed proper sourness. The finished product provided essential vitamins during months when fresh vegetables were unavailable. Families gathered for kraut-making parties, turning hard labor into social occasions with shared food and conversation. Beeswax candle making provided light during long winter evenings when kerosene cost precious money and darkness fell by late afternoon. Families who kept bees harvested wax along with honey, melting combs in water to separate and purify the golden wax. Grandma dipped cotton wicks repeatedly into melted beeswax, building up layers until candles reached proper thickness. The process required patience. Each dip added only a thin coating that needed cooling before the next immersion. Some families poured wax into molds for faster production, though dipped candles burned longer and evenly. Beeswax candles smelled faintly of honey and burned cleaner than tallow alternatives made from animal fat. The soft golden light they produced became associated with evening Bible reading, mending, and family conversations. Children helped with dipping, learning the rhythmic patience required. Candle making transformed a beekeeping byproduct into essential household supplies. Corn shuck crafts turned harvest waste into useful household items and children's toys throughout Appalachian communities. After corn was shucked, the papery outer leaves were saved, dried, and braided into an astonishing variety of objects. Grandma wove chair seats and back supports that lasted decades, made doormats that scraped mud from boots, twisted ropes strong enough for farm work, and fashioned dolls that entertained children for generations. The shucks required proper drying and occasional dampening to remain pliable during braiding. Different techniques produced different textures, tight braids for durability, loose weaves for softness. Children learned to make simple items first, progressing to complex patterns as skills developed. The practice connected families to their harvest, transforming what others burned or composted into objects of genuine utility and beauty that represented mountain resourcefulness. Dandelion winemaking transformed a common lawn weed into a golden beverage that graced special occasions throughout the year. In early spring, when dandelions bloomed abundantly, children gathered blossoms by the gallon, picking only yellow petals and leaving bitter green parts behind. Grandma poured boiling water over the petals, letting them steep for days before straining and adding sugar, yeast, and citrus. The mixture fermented in crocks for weeks, bubbling quietly in warm kitchen corners. After clarifying and aging, the wine emerged pale gold with delicate floral sweetness, unlike any store-bought beverage. Families served dandelion wine at weddings, holidays, and any gathering worthy of celebration. The practice demonstrated that valuable things grew freely for those who recognized them. Some grandmas made wines from elderflowers, wild grapes, or berries, building cellars stocked with homemade beverages. Wild game preparation knowledge allowed mountain families to transform deer, rabbit, squirrel, and other hunted animals into safe, delicious meals. Grandma understood that wild meat required different handling than domestic livestock, immediate field dressing, proper cooling, and aging to develop tenderness. Venison hung in cold outbuildings for days before butchering, the aging process breaking down tough muscle fibers. Squirrels and rabbits were soaked overnight in salted water to draw out blood and mellow strong flavors. Cooking methods varied by animal and cut. Tough haunches became stews while tender loins were fried quickly. Grandma knew which herbs masked gamey tastes, how long to marinate, and when meat was properly done. This knowledge meant hunted meat supplemented purchased protein, stretching food budgets while providing variety. The skills passed through generations ensured families could feed themselves from the land. Persimmon pudding with hard sauce was Christmas dessert that captured wild sweetness of mountain autumn. Persimmons had to be gathered after first frost when they became soft and intensely sweet, their astringency gone. The fruit was pressed through sieves to create smooth pulp mixed with flour, eggs, milk, spices, and molasses. Baked slowly, the pudding emerged dark and dense, its texture somewhere between cake and custard. Hard sauce, butter and sugar beaten until fluffy, flavored with vanilla or whiskey, melted over warm pudding, creating rich contrast. In mountain communities, persimmon pudding represented patience and knowledge, knowing when persimmons were ready, understanding how to preserve their flavor. The pudding was deeply spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg, its persimmon sweetness unlike anything else. This was Christmas dessert that couldn't be rushed or bought, requiring understanding of seasons and willingness to wait for nature's timing. Beans and taters were what kept mountain families going when there was little else to count on, the kind of meal that stretched far and satisfied deep. Pinto beans simmered low and long, softening with salt, fatback, or even just water when meat was short. Meanwhile, potatoes waited nearby, boiled, mashed, or fried crisp to turn a pot of beans into a full supper. Together, they made a plate that felt heavier than hunger and warmer than hardship. The beans brought body, the potatoes brought comfort, and the combination brought peace after long days. Mountain folks never needed fancy seasonings or sides. They just needed food that filled and soothed. Children knew the smell of beans simmering before they even came through the door. It was the smell of stability, of knowing you would eat, even in hard years. Beans and taters taught patience, gratitude, and the quiet pride that comes from surviving together. It was more than supper. It was a ritual that reminded families what mattered. Every forkful told the same story. Work hard, share what you have, and be thankful for enough. It was food for living, not showing off, and no one ever left hungry. Fire-roasted trout offered a meal as fresh as the rushing streams where it was caught. After a day spent following icy creeks, hunters cleaned the silvery fish with swift hands, sprinkling only salt and maybe a squeeze of wild lemon if fortune allowed. Green sapling sticks became natural skewers, holding each trout above a crackling fire until the skin blistered and the flesh turned opaque and flaky. The scent of pine smoke mingled with the sweet aroma of fish, calling companions to the circle of stones around the flames. No heavy pans or complicated spices were needed, only patience to turn the sticks until the meat cooked evenly. The first bite revealed pure mountain flavor, delicate and clean, a reward for hours of casting lines or setting nets in cold water. Modern anglers may pack foil and seasonings, but the unadorned pleasure of trout roasted directly over wood coals remains unmatched, a taste of wild rivers and clear night skies that nourished both body and spirit. Okra and tomatoes with rice was a classic side dish that thrived in southern kitchens, blending garden staples into a filling, flavorful plate. Fresh okra was sliced and stewed with tomatoes, onions, and sometimes bacon fat, then spooned generously over rice. It was inexpensive and wholesome, relying on vegetables that were easy to grow in the southern climate. For families, it was a dependable dish that appeared at weeknight dinners, Sunday suppers, and potlucks alike. The combination of tangy tomatoes and tender okra gave it a unique texture and taste that many children learned to love, even if reluctantly at first. Rice made it hearty enough to stand alone when meat was scarce, adding value to a humble dish. Though once celebrated, it has slowly faded as processed foods and fast meals replaced traditional garden cooking. Today, it is remembered mainly in rural kitchens or cookbooks. Okra and tomatoes with rice remains a snapshot of how Southern cooks turned simple harvests into comfort. Salt-rising bread with bacon drippings offered a rich and rustic loaf that captured the art of natural fermentation long before packaged yeast became common. Grandmothers began the process with a warm starter of cornmeal and scalded milk that sat overnight until wild bacteria created a distinct cheesy aroma. This slow magic produced a dense yet tender bread with a flavor unlike any other, slightly tangy and wonderfully fragrant. To heighten the richness, they brushed the baked loaf with hot bacon drippings, allowing the savory fat to seep into the crust and perfume the kitchen. Families enjoyed thick slices for breakfast with fresh butter or alongside hearty soups for supper. The bread required patience and trust in tradition, a lesson in letting time and nature do the work. Children woke to the smell of the loaf cooling on the counter, a scent that spoke of skill and heritage. Salt-rising bread with bacon drippings remains a beloved emblem of Southern perseverance and the quiet mastery of age-old kitchen techniques. Crackling cornbread with cane syrup was Christmas side that elevated simple cornbread into something rich and celebratory. The cracklings, crispy bits of rendered pork fat left from lard making, were mixed into cornbread batter before baking, creating pockets of crunchy, porky richness throughout. The bread baked in cast iron until crusty outside and tender inside, its top golden and inviting. Served with dark cane syrup drizzled over warm slices, this combined savory and sweet in ways that defined mountain eating. In rural communities, crackling cornbread meant using every part of the hog, transforming scraps into celebration. The cracklings added protein and flavor that plain cornbread lacked, while cane syrup provided sweetness families couldn't always afford. This was Christmas abundance created from what others might discard, proving mountain cooks knew how to make luxury from nothing. Tomato gravy and biscuits turned hardship into comfort with every spoonful. When fresh tomatoes ripened or canned ones were on hand, folks would simmer them down with flour, bacon grease, and milk until they formed a rich, tangy sauce. Ladled over warm biscuits or rice, it became a hearty breakfast or a quick supper. The flavor was both sharp and smooth, the perfect balance of simple ingredients made grand. It was poor man's luxury, bright with color and full of heart. The gravy clung to every bite like it belonged there. Families gathered around it, talking slow, eating slower, grateful for what little they had. Tomato gravy proved that flavor came from care, not cost, and that the right recipe could lift spirits no matter the season. It was mountain ingenuity at its finest, homemade, humble, and full of soul. Bear-fat biscuits carried the taste of hard wilderness living and the quiet ingenuity of hunters who used every resource. When butter or lard ran out, rendered bear fat provided a rich, earthy flavor and the perfect texture for flaky biscuits cooked in heavy cast-iron pans over open fires. Hunters melted the fat slowly to remove impurities, then mixed it with flour, a pinch of salt, and cold spring water to form a soft dough that baked into golden rounds. The biscuits emerged tender inside with crisp edges that held the subtle smokiness of the bear itself, making them a breakfast strong enough to last through hours of tracking or chopping wood. Families living deep in the mountains often saved bear hunts for late autumn when the animals were fattened for winter, ensuring the rendered fat would last for months of baking and frying. Modern kitchens rarely use such an ingredient, yet those who remember describe a depth of flavor and resilience that ordinary butter can never equal, a flavor earned through effort and respect for the wild. Blackberry dumplings were once a highlight of southern summers, made when berries ripened along hedgerows and farm fields. Families would gather buckets of wild blackberries, then stew them with sugar until they formed a sweet, fragrant sauce. Into this bubbling mixture, cooks dropped spoonfuls of simple dough that puffed into soft dumplings as they simmered. The result was a dessert that was both filling and joyful, capturing the taste of summer in every bite. Children loved helping pick berries, often sneaking handfuls as they worked, while adults valued the chance to turn free fruit into a crowd pleaser. Blackberry dumplings were often served with milk or cream if available, making them even more indulgent. They were the kind of dish that brought neighbors together, with everyone pitching in during harvest. Today, they have nearly vanished, replaced by store-bought pies and packaged desserts. Their disappearance is a loss of flavor and tradition, because blackberry dumplings carried with them the sweetness of both the land and the season. Wild violet syrup pancakes brought the magic of early spring flowers to the breakfast table in a swirl of color and fragrance. Grandmothers gathered handfuls of fresh violet blossoms when meadows turned purple after the first warm rains. The petals were gently simmered with sugar and lemon until the syrup glowed a deep amethyst and carried the delicate scent of the season. Poured over fluffy pancakes hot from the griddle, the syrup added a floral sweetness that transformed an ordinary morning meal into a celebration of spring itself. Children delighted in the surprising color that tinted the pancakes a faint lavender as the syrup soaked in. Because violets bloom briefly, the tradition encouraged families to savor the moment and to treasure the fleeting beauty of nature. Wild violet syrup pancakes remain a testament to the Southern grandmother's ability to turn the simplest gifts of the field into a breakfast that tasted like fresh air and the promise of longer, warmer days to come. Fried catfish with hush puppies was Christmas Eve tradition in communities near rivers and creeks. The catfish were caught through holes in December ice or from cold but unfrozen streams, their white flesh firm and sweet. Coated in seasoned cornmeal and fried until golden, the fish developed crackling crust while staying moist inside. Hush puppies, cornmeal fritters mixed with onions, fried alongside, creating complete meal. In rural communities along southern waterways, catfish Christmas Eve meant abundant local protein requiring only skill and patience to catch. The tradition often included whole community fish fries where neighbors gathered. The catfish was mild and flaky, the hush puppies crispy and slightly sweet. Served with coleslaw and hot sauce, this was Christmas celebration built on what rivers provided freely, proving holiday feasts didn't require expensive ingredients when you had knowledge, skill, and waters full of fish waiting for those patient enough to catch them. Fried cornbread hoe cakes were the sound of supper sizzling in a skillet. Cornmeal, water, salt, and a little grease were all you needed to turn a handful of nothing into a golden brown meal. Hillbilly kitchens loved this trick because it was fast, cheap, and never disappointed. You would drop spoonfuls of batter into the pan, listen for that familiar hiss, and wait for the edges to crisp. Hoe cakes were bread, but they were also pride, a way to make the table feel full even when meat was missing. They paired with beans, greens, and gravy, soaking up every last bit of flavor. No fork was needed, just hands and hunger. The smell alone could stop anyone passing by. Fried cornbread hoe cakes were the mountain version of comfort food, simple fried perfection that spoke louder than any recipe ever could. They were proof that flavor comes from fire, patience, and heart. Corn dodger cakes were dense patties of cornmeal fried in bacon grease, built to endure long hunts and endless trails. Trappers stirred ground corn with hot water and a touch of salt, shaping the mixture into thick rounds that held together without eggs or milk. Dropped into sizzling grease, they crisped on the outside while staying firm inside, creating a portable bread that resisted spoilage. Wrapped in cloth, the cakes traveled in saddlebags and coat pockets, ready to be eaten cold or warmed briefly over a fire. Their sturdy texture and rich smoky flavor gave quick energy to hunters crossing ridges or rivers. Many men claimed the taste improved after a day in the pack as the bacon fat soaked deeper into the corn. At night, the cake served as both side dish and main meal when meat was scarce. Today, the name survives mostly in old stories, but the hearty crunch of a true corn dodger remains a symbol of rugged independence and frontier practicality. Pickled pig's feet were Christmas delicacy, transforming butchering scraps into something prized. When families butchered hogs in December, nothing was wasted, especially feet becoming treats after preparation. The feet were cleaned meticulously, boiled tender with bay leaves and peppercorns, then packed into stone crocks and covered with spiced vinegar heated with garlic and pepper. They cured for weeks, vinegar penetrating meat and softening cartilage until everything became tender and tangy. Served cold on Christmas morning, pickled feet were eaten with fingers, meat falling off bones while gelatinous texture melted on tongues. In rural communities throughout the South, these represented thrift elevated to tradition, using every part of hog and creating something delicious. Children learned to appreciate pickled feet as treats, not scraps. The vinegary tang cut through rich holiday meals. This proved mountain cooking was about transforming everything into something worth celebrating. Shoe fly pie, while often linked with Pennsylvania Dutch, had a strong foothold in southern farm kitchens too. This pie was built on molasses, a cheap sweetener that gave it a dark, rich flavor unmatched by sugar. Crumb topping made from flour, butter, and sugar was sprinkled over the filling, creating a pie that was both sticky and tender. For farming families, it was an easy way to transform pantry staples into something indulgent. Shoe fly pie often appeared on breakfast tables as well as at supper, offering sweetness at any time of day. The name supposedly came from the need to shoo flies away from the sticky molasses, a detail children found amusing. Though once common, the pie slowly disappeared as molasses faded from southern kitchens, replaced by refined sugar and more modern desserts. Shoe fly pie endures in folklore but rarely in reality, leaving only a memory of its humble, sweet character. Forgotten now, it represents the deep ties between food, resourcefulness, and the land that made it possible. Chinquapin chestnut dressing showcased a tiny nut once abundant in southern forests, but nearly lost by the mid-20th century. Grandmothers gathered the small chestnuts, cracking their thin shells to reveal sweet, dense meat that added depth to traditional bread stuffing. Mixed with crumbled cornbread, onions, and sage, the dressing baked to a golden crust that perfumed the kitchen with warm, earthy notes. Because the Chinquapin harvest was unpredictable, this dish was reserved for holidays or special Sunday dinners, making it a treasured seasonal event. Children joined the harvest, their pockets filling with the glossy brown nuts that hid beneath fallen leaves. Each bite of the finished dressing carried the flavor of autumn woods and the satisfaction of a successful forage. Chinquapin chestnut dressing stands today as a memory of forests once thick with these small treasures and of the grandmothers who taught that the rarest ingredients often come from careful observation and the patient work of many small hands. Cured venison shoulder with red-eye gravy was Christmas dinner, showing how preservation created celebration. The venison shoulder was cured in salt through late fall, transforming fresh meat into something that would last through winter. By Christmas, the shoulder had developed concentrated flavor, salty, slightly funky, intensely meaty. It was soaked to remove excess salt, then slow roasted until tender. The pan drippings were deglazed with strong black coffee, creating red-eye gravy, dark, slightly bitter, deeply savory. In mountain communities, cured venison meant Christmas protein that cost nothing but hunting skill and preservation knowledge. The meat was lean and dense, each slice packed with flavor that fresh venison couldn't match. Served with biscuits and greens, this was mountain fine dining earned through November hunts and December patience. The red-eye gravy cut through richness while adding complexity, proving simple techniques created profound results. Fried cabbage and onions was the meal that turned scraps into a feast. You started with whatever you had: a small head of cabbage, a tired onion, and the last spoonful of bacon grease from breakfast. Toss it all into a cast iron skillet and let it fry until the edges browned and the smell filled the house. There was no recipe written down, just instinct and a good ear for the sound of sizzling vegetables. This dinner showed what made hillfolk cooking special: the ability to turn nothing into something worth sitting down for. It was hearty, smoky, and comforting, the kind of dish that could hush an empty stomach and still leave leftovers for breakfast. Paired with a hunk of cornbread or a slice of salt pork, it reminded everyone that flavor did not come from money. It came from patience. Sometimes the simplest meals were the ones that made life feel rich. Salt pork and wild greens turned the harsh mountain landscape into a plate of rich sustenance. Hunters carried slabs of salt-cured pork that kept for months without spoiling, slicing off pieces to fry in iron skillets until the fat rendered into a fragrant base. Foraged greens like dandelion, mustard, or young nettles were added to the sizzling pan, their bitter edges mellowing in the smoky drippings. A sprinkle of coarse salt and a dash of creek water finished the dish, creating a simple yet powerful meal full of essential minerals and fats. Mountain men praised the way the greens cut through the heaviness of pork, while the pork turned wild leaves into a feast worthy of the long trails. Gatherers moved silently through meadows at dawn to find the freshest shoots, knowing that every handful brought health and strength. Today, the idea of living off cured meat and weeds may seem distant, but the memory of that savory balance remains a testament to survival and resourceful cooking in untamed country. Cold ash. Honey custard demonstrated a gentle cooking method that used the fading warmth of a hearth long after the fire died down. Grandmothers prepared a simple mixture of milk, farm eggs, and golden honey, then poured it into heavy earthenware crocks. These were buried in the cooled ashes of the fireplace where the slow, even heat coaxed the custard to a silky set overnight. By morning, the crocks emerged with a faint smoky aroma and a texture as smooth as velvet. Families woke to the subtle scent of honey and ash, a quiet reward for patience and careful tending. The technique required no active fire and no costly equipment, only the wisdom to harness lingering warmth. Cold ash honey custard remains a beautiful example of resourceful cooking, where nature's gentle heat and a grandmother's steady hand turned a few simple ingredients into a breakfast or dessert that tasted of hearth and home and the comforting rhythm of a fire that never truly sleeps. Salt-cured country ham was Christmas luxury taking months to create and symbolizing prosperity through patience. These weren't store hams, but whole hog legs cured in salt, then hung in smokehouses through fall and winter. The curing began in November, with fresh hams rubbed with salt and sometimes sugar, drawing out moisture and preserving meat without refrigeration. By Christmas, hams developed deep mahogany exteriors and concentrated salty sweet flavor unlike anything modern. The ham was soaked overnight to remove excess salt, then baked slowly with brown sugar glaze, creating caramelized crust. Sliced thin, the meat was intensely flavorful, salty, smoky, rich, requiring only biscuits and red-eye gravy. In Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, country ham represented wealth and foresight, since families began curing in fall for Christmas. The smell of ham baking filled houses Christmas morning. This wasn't bought but made food, requiring knowledge of salt ratios and smoking. Soup bone and potato hash was what happened when thrift met hunger. After a long week, that old soup bone still had work to do. It went back into the pot for one more boil, drawing out every ounce of flavor left in it. Then you would toss in diced potatoes, onions, maybe a carrot if you were lucky, and fry it all together until crisp. The smell filled the kitchen with promise, even when there was not much else to eat. Mountain cooking was about stretching what you had until it could not stretch anymore. This hash tasted smoky, salty, and satisfying. Nothing fancy, just real food made by real hands. Families knew that wasting even a scrap was a sin against hard work. Soup bone and potato hash proved that resourcefulness could taste every bit as good as abundance when cooked with patience and pride. Prairie hen. Fricassee filled rough cabins with the comforting aroma of slow braised game birds bathed in cream and wild herbs gathered along mountain trails. Hunters cleaned the prairie hens with careful hands, browning the meat in heavy iron pots before adding onions, garlic, and a splash of spring water. A small measure of cream or milk, if it could be spared, created a velvety sauce that simmered for hours until the birds turned tender and the broth thickened into a rich gravy. Families served the fricassee with coarse bread or boiled root vegetables, each bite a blend of earthy herbs and gentle smoke from the fire. This dish transformed lean wild game into something elegant, proving that frontier cooks valued both nourishment and quiet pleasure. Around the hearth, elders shared stories of long hunts across open grasslands while children eagerly awaited their share of the tender meat. Though prairie hens have grown scarce and cream is no longer a rare treasure, the memory of this rustic yet graceful meal remains a tribute to patience and the simple luxury of good company. Cypress knees. Stew drew its name and subtle flavor from the swampy roots of the cypress tree that lined bayou waters. Grandmothers simmered fresh fish, small shrimp, and local vegetables in a seasoned broth enriched with a few cleaned cypress knees, which released a gentle woodsy essence during cooking. The stew carried the spirit of the Louisiana wetlands, blending the sweetness of seafood with the mysterious aroma of the swamp. Served with crusty bread to soak up the broth, it warmed families after long days spent fishing or gathering along the water's edge. Children learned respect for the bayou as they watched elders harvest the knees carefully without harming the living trees. The dish reflected both reverence for nature and the inventive cooking that defined communities living close to the land. Cypress knees stew remains a rare and evocative taste of the Deep South, a recipe passed quietly from grandmother to grandchild as a celebration of place and patience. Fried rabbit sausage with buttermilk biscuits was Christmas breakfast that turned wild game into something special enough for holiday morning. Mountain families ground rabbit meat with pork fat, sage, black pepper, and salt, forming patties that fried crispy in cast iron. The sausage was lean from rabbit but rich from pork fat, creating perfect balance. Served alongside buttermilk biscuits, split and buttered, this was breakfast that required hunting skill and butchering knowledge. In Appalachian communities, Christmas morning meant rabbit sausage sizzling while biscuits baked, filling houses with savory smells. Children woke to this aroma, understanding Christmas began with food earned through work. The sausage was tender inside with crackling crust outside, its sage flavor marking it as celebration food. This represented mountain Christmas, wild game transformed into tradition, poverty turned into pride through skill and resourcefulness. Fried bologna sandwiches were the poor man's steak, but no one eating them ever complained because they hit every craving just right. Thick pink slices of bologna slapped down on a hot iron skillet and sizzled until the edges curled like little cups, blistering enough to draw out that smoky, salty bite everyone loved. The smell alone could make an empty kitchen feel full. Add a swipe of yellow mustard, a slice of onion, and 2 soft pieces of white bread, and you had a meal that worked for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It was cheap, fast, and always satisfying. Kids carried them in brown paper bags to school, and grown men packed them for long days in fields, mines, or mills. In the hills, fried bologna sandwiches were as dependable as sunrise, simple proof that flavor never depended on price. The grease soaked through napkins, but no one minded. It was comfort food at its best. When money was thin, this sandwich filled both belly and spirit, turning hard times into something a little easier to swallow. It was fried, humble, and proud, a true taste of mountain living that never needed dressing up to feel right. Pork backbone and dumplings was Christmas comfort food that transformed butchering remnants into soul-warming celebration. The backbone, cut from hogs during December slaughter, was meaty enough to flavor broth but cheap enough for everyday tables. The bones simmered for hours with onions and black pepper until meat fell away tender. Then dumplings were dropped into bubbling broth, Flour, lard, and buttermilk rolled thin and cut into strips. They puffed up while cooking, absorbing rich pork flavor and creating thickness. In rural communities throughout the South, backbone and dumplings meant Christmas thrift elevated to tradition. Families gathered around steaming pots, spooning dumplings and tender pork into bowls. This wasn't fancy food, but it was deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that warmed you from inside while snow fell outside. The dumplings were tender and rich, the pork sweet and falling apart soft. This represented mountain Christmas, making celebration from what you had, turning necessity into tradition passed through generations. Which forgotten hillbilly cooking trick would you bring back to your kitchen? Drop your answer in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe so you never miss another trip down memory lane.